not being able to identify emotional states, recognize them, communicate them, respond to them in meaningful ways means ultimately they're going to continue to dominate us in ways that we don't want, or ways that hurt us or hurt the people who are important to us. So if there's a P that strikes me as the most ballsy, it's this one.
Well said. Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Men's Collective podcast. Coming back again as we continue exploring the 5 Ps of purpose that we work on embodying and having as our foundation at the Men's Collective, as part of the work that we do within our 8-week cohorts and just kind of our DNA as the broader Men's Collective. And so we've already covered the first 3 Ps, and today we are exploring the 4th, which is presence. And so what do we mean by presence here at the Collective, Pierre? How do we define that? How does that look? And how does that invite us into something deeper?
Yeah. We often talk about presence in 2 different ways. The first being focused awareness or mindfulness, staying in the present moment. And the second is kind of a different, it's almost embodying of being, carrying yourself with a strength of presence. And they both involve, I think they both involve some important appreciations of how our neuroscience works and also our nervous system's regulation. Because we end up talking about focus and about awareness to our own emotion and being able to regulate those emotional experiences, to feel them, to allow them to pass over us, to be able to communicate them. And so we start with how to navigate presence in terms of mindfulness, and then move into, once we're aware, once we're focused, how is it that we experience our own emotional state? What does it say to us? And how do we respond to it so that we don't interfere in a meaningful way with the last P, which is principles? So we don't do something that violates our values or hurts our relationships.
Right.
In fact, in many cases, when we know how to harness our presence, how to harness our mindfulness, and how to articulate our experience of emotion, it becomes much easier to act in accordance with the values that we name.
Absolutely. And to speak more to that, to give a little insight into what we teach in the Collective and the cohort, and what we do here is, mindfulness is such a big term that people look into, and like, how does it look? And, is it something that just people in tight yoga pants do? Or monks with shaved heads that live in a monastery. And sure, all these people do these things, or, how far back does it go to the dawn? I think it does go back to the dawn of man. It's not nothing new that people have been mindful. But I think the angle we take as well is this nervous system regulation through our nervous system. And I think that's the big thing, the foundation that we're laying here is the power of the autonomic nervous system, kind of, which is grounded in the polyvagal theory, which is backed by a lot of research and neuroscience and the studying of the brain and the body and how it interacts. And really, our need to be aware of what state am I in? What nervous system state am I in? Which is really being mindful, right? Where am I? Am I aware of where I'm at, where I'm operating from? Because, to kind of paraphrase and quote Dr. Porges, who was the founder of the polyvagal theory, really dependent upon what nervous system state we are in is how we experience ourselves and the world around us. So it shapes how we respond and or react to the world and to ourselves. And so if we're mindless, if we're not aware of where we are, we're going to be probably not living in our values and our principles, right? It'll probably be difficult to, going back to the previous P, because we're not going to be aware of what's happening. But more importantly, we're going to probably find that we're more reactionary, and in ways that we may react in ways that later we're kind of beating ourselves up for, because we did something again that we didn't want to do. Or I said the thing I said I would never say, or I did that, then a way of guilt and shame that comes in. And so we want to kind of move away from being kind of mindless and living reactionarily. I don't know if that's a word, made that up. Reactionarily. Felt
Yeah.
like it flowed. To being
I
mindful
got you.
and responsive. And so, our three nervous system states, those that don't know real quick, is we know it's our parasympathetic state, or ventral, which is our state of health, growth, and restoration. It's where we feel grounded, we feel connected, we feel calm, we feel open, we feel aware of ourselves and those around us. And then our first line of defense, and again, this is all our hard wiring as mammals that's built into our nervous system for threat, is that we move into the fight or flight state. That fight flight really state of mobilization to deal with a real or perceived threat. And that's fueled by anxiety, by worry, which is our flight state. And our fight state is fueled by anger, annoyance, frustration, right? And those states serve a purpose, an adaptive purpose to deal with life, whether it's our work life, our family life, societal life, whatever. And when it's working for us, it mobilizes us to effectively respond. Right? When it's ineffective, when it's working against us, or if we're stuck in that state, an overactive state, that leads to exhaustion, to burnout, to being reactive, to those around us and to ourselves, to an inability to relax and being constantly on edge, and I can't sleep, and I'm thinking, and I can't shut my mind off, and right, it leads to that kind of way of I don't want to call it living, but kind of just surviving. And so, that part of our nervous system serves two kind of primary ways, whether it's for us or against us. And part of that is we need to be aware of that. Are we living in that state most of the time? And for a lot of men I've worked with, I think they kind of live and operate more kind of in that kind of hyperactive, hypervigilant, anxious, anger state for various reasons. And then the final state, there's this blended state of freeze, which kind of propels us between kind of a mobilized state of activation of fight flight, but then it also moves us into a state of what we call the other part of the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, which is the dorsal branch, which is a shut down, immobilized, disassociative, disconnected, numb state of survival. It's kind of what a possum does. It plays dead when there's a threat. It shuts down. And so we also can exist in that state. And when it's working for us, it's a place where our body kind of shuts everything down just to survive. And it could serve often an adaptive process for us. But where it's not adaptive, where we get stuck, is where we operate in kind of this numb, disconnected, mindless, disassociative state from ourselves, from our friends and family. We are often low energy. We're not motivated. We feel stuck and overwhelmed all the time. We feel just kind of blah and kind of like aimless, right? And so becoming also aware of, are we existing in that state often too much? And then understanding why and unpacking that, like that helps give a tremendous amount of information of becoming aware. And we can move through these states quite quickly depending on what's happening in our life. And we move in and out, and it's a flow. And so part of the work we do in presence is we need to be aware of, where am I right now? And we do a lot of embodiment practices in our calls weekly to check in, to become aware, because as men, that awareness, that presence is like, it's a powerful tool. And without it, if we are disconnected from our awareness of self, of where we are, we'll kind of, I think, to some degree, always remain stuck and reactionary. So we need that skill. That muscle has to be worked out, and on a regular basis. It's a skill that we need to become aware of, practicing presence. Where am I? Checking in, listening, because once we know that, then we can have an awareness of what direction do I need to go in? What skills or tools do I need to really help me navigate this? What do I really need to help me move through this state? And what is contributing to where I'm at right now? Is it something that I can change and let go of and shift? Or is it something that really I can't really change this? And really, this is just the state I need to be in? Because again, sometimes we are in a survival state due to our environment, our circumstances, and that's the best we can do. We don't want to shame it. We don't want to say, "Oh yeah, I'm here because of these things," and how do I do my best to not get sucked in and controlled by them, but use these nervous system states as informative that help us make the most effective decision as we can.
Yeah, brilliant. In a lot of ways, all of our nervous system states are important for certain times.
Yes.
And it's hugely powerful to be able to recognize, where am I right now?
Mm-hmm.
And how do I operate in a way that that can be most effective? Again, in line with thinking about my story, my values, the ways that I see the world around me, but also what's likely to emerge from me right now. If I'm trying to force a state away, or I'm not fully owning where I am, then I'm living in a place of mindlessness, or at least not being present. And I think this is another one where presence often feels sort of squishy, but
Yeah.
man, when you feel it, you know it. And when you see another man who's got it, it's pretty strong. I mean, it's a powerful precursor to discipline, to productivity, to efficiency. I mean, even the studies on just mindfulness alone have shown greater gratitude, less hostility, more fulfilling interactions, fewer depressive anxiety symptoms, even physiologic responses like lower resting heart rate, lower respiratory rate. And there's some really powerful evidence around showing up in a purposeful, mindful way.
Yeah. Well, and because if we're not paying attention, we get so stuck in so many different ways in our lives, at work, at home, with friends, with family. I mean, even practically speaking, when I'm operating at my best, I'm very keenly aware of what am I sensing internally before I go into this, whether I'm talking to my kids or to my wife or work.
Yeah.
It's like, if I'm unaware, that's usually when I'm reactionary. If I take that moment to pause and hey, where am I, being mindful? Like, oh, okay, that's where I am. What's an effective response here in this moment? I feel like yelling, or I feel like doing this, because we all get in those moments. It's like, oh, that's not effective. That's me operating out of an overwhelm of my nervous system that's putting me into a fight state. Or maybe I'm trying to numb out right now because of all the stress, and maybe I'm over relying on alcohol, binge watching shows, whatever. And really what I need is actually not to numb out, but I need connection, right? Because often what we really need is some type of connection with groundedness to help move through this, rather than disconnection, isolation, right? And because often what happens too, if we're reactionary, maybe I yell at my kids or my wife, well, then what tends to happen for most men is then they have a whole other cycle on top of that, right? Now the shame, and that often leads to now numbing and disassociating, because now that's so overwhelming. So I have to get away from that. And then I'm stuck in this cycle of living from a overactive, angry, irritable state to now shame and disconnection and numbing. And then I kind of stay in this infinite loop, rather than, man, if I could just pause and ask, the power of pause, of mindfulness. Okay, what do I actually need right now? Which I know for a lot of men is a question they've maybe never asked, what they really truly need. Like, what do I actually need?
Yeah.
And learning to ask that question and seeing that that's a powerful, very powerful question to ask. It's not sissy woo-woo stuff, but it's actually one of the most important questions to ask and to be good at answering, because then we know how we could effectively navigate this to a place where we're connected and we're integrated with our values, that we are living a life that is grounded and moving us in a direction that where we want to go.
Yeah, for sure. It also brings up this other bit around being aware of our own emotional state. I mean, this is another really big P, in part because we're touching on things that don't often get connected to men's work, or even the way in which we're invited to share our experiences.
Right.
Because, and we see this a lot, because even when we ask men how we feel or how they feel, and I suppose I can also just speak to my own experience. When I'm usually asked how I'm doing or how I'm feeling, it's often fine. It's often just sort of glossing over things. It's not really an invitation for me to check in and think, well, I might actually be operating today with a lot of anxiety, or I might be operating today with a lot of sadness. It's not that I'm trying to hold in.
Yeah.
And somehow those experiences, emotional experiences that get held in, they find a way out. And sometimes they're not. My experience, especially when that emotion has been anger, and I've judged it, tried to sort of will it away, it's still there. So what do I do with it? How do I respond to it? I think that's a big part of navigating presence, being able to communicate in a way that honors our emotional experiences, doesn't judge it away, and uses it to our favor, not to our detriment.
Yeah, it's informative. It's informing us of something, and it's learning actually to listen to the power of the body. I think so many men, and myself included at times, we're very we're head up, neck up, we call it. Like we're disconnected from the body, and the body actually has a tremendous amount of information from all the work I've done and expertise I've done in practice with the Institute and just body work and somatic work. Is like, wow, there is like, growing up, I didn't really think about that, as a kid, but man, if we are disconnected, it's going to show up in so many ways that just creates more stuckness. Like you said, it just keeps us stuck. But once we learn the power of the body and what's our nervous system saying to us, man, it unlocks a whole plethora of awareness, of non-judgment, of actually, oh, that's what's going on. It helps us be in a place of curiosity and listening, and like, what's it informing me, and what is it really based on? Now I can do something with it and actually be okay with where I'm at. Like, I'm sad, and that's okay. And what do I really need if I am sad or if I'm anxious? And what do I do here? And actually, when we ask that kind of question, it leads to actually a place often of groundedness, of connection, of relief, right? Of release, rather than it seeping and leaking in ways that creates more stuff for us as men. And also, I know we're coming up against a lot of tropes around men of what we should and shouldn't do. So I know that's a big thing of obviously this, and what we teach in the cohort as well is also practices. How do we actually do this? Not just talking, but do this practice it this way. And we give you the tools necessary to take this concept and actually put it into your day in and day out lives, because that's really where the rubber meets the road here. The work we do is that we got to just take this and actually apply it, not just talking conceptually, but now what? How do I do this? And we do that in a lot of ways, one of which is just basic daily practices, breath work, different things, also with connecting with other men, right? And actually showing how to do nervous system to nervous system conversations and how powerful that can be. And so, any final thoughts on presence before we close out today?
It's a huge one.
I know it is.
Well, it is. And, I think about all the important ways in which just being able to appreciate emotion and how to respond to it it's a massive and really powerful skill. Yeah, I think about it in terms of connecting with other people, especially in marriages or romantic relationships, but not just there. I mean, it's important in friendships. It's important at work.
As a parent,
for sure. Oh man, it's definitely important as a parent.
Oh yeah, I feel it all the time. Yeah,
I believe it.
Yeah,
I believe it. So it's a powerful one. It's not an easy one. I'm also thinking, this is probably one of the hardest or most challenging of the P's, because so much of the story, the programming around masculinity, avoids entirely the idea of emotional response.
Yeah. It's very anti.
Very.
Very anti.
It's just, it doesn't
It really
make a lot of sense. In a lot of ways, it is an incredibly powerful skill that we don't often see used in a positive way. So I think it is often where we see some really strong connection and deep personal digging for men.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it's a really powerful.
Yeah,
it's a powerful thing to see.
Yeah, and I agree. I also understand why so many of us are so disconnected because of the kind of immature, rigid views of masculinity that kind of cuts us off. And I'm like once you understand the science behind it, I'm like, dude, how do you discount this? Like, it literally show like just. So anyway, I could talk.
Yeah, I mean,
it's
your body's your brain's and your body's response to past experience.
Yeah,
and it's not just some bullshit that you've got to hide.
No.
Yeah, and we're not talking about like turning into puddles of mush whenever we talk about emotion. I mean, that's not really. I think that,
and that wouldn't be effective either. Puddles of mush is.
I've said this a few times, and I think it keeps coming up. And I'm speaking for myself too. Men tend to be we tend to be extremists. So I think oftentimes, if we think we're letting the cat out of the bag, or we're by touching on something like emotions, that we're just going to like go to the opposite extreme and not be able to regulate. It's quite the opposite. In fact, not being able to identify emotional states, recognize them, communicate them, respond to them in meaningful ways means ultimately they're going to continue to dominate us.
Yeah.
In ways that we don't want, or ways that hurt us or hurt the people who are important to us. So if there's a P that strikes me as the most ballsy, it's this one.
Yeah. Well said. Well, yeah, I think it's a great note to end on, that this is one that in a way is I would say even most adventurous in a way.
Yeah.
And it requires, I think, a lot of courage too, just given the typical way that we have been trained as men. It takes a lot of courage to see this as actually being courageous and brave and strong, right? And so, if you're looking for more of this, if you want to understand more about what we do here at the Collective, just go to menscollective.co for more information, for about the cohorts, about the Collective, which is where we go and talk about this, that we don't just talk, but we do it, we practice it, we engage it, we unpack it. And again, we'd love to hear from you and check it out anytime. But until then, we'll see you next week with our final P of power. And Pierre, enjoy your day, man.
You too.